McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop, Episode 6, Stranger Than a Nightmare. September 14th, 1921, continued. I stood staring at the black gazebo, at the ring of purple lights. In the center of the gazebo, one of the people stood up and beckoned to me. I didn't move an inch. I stayed rooted to the ground, and I decided that I hated adventures, and I hated China Eyes, and I hated this cave, and I hated Renfield. The carousel horse on the floor looked like it was in pain. I wanted an adventure to get away from the nightmare of my life, not make it worse. "You said you wanted to know what's happening to you," Renfield said. "They're waiting to tell you. They're waiting to tell you what a magic unusual really is." I looked at Renfield. His face looked haggard and ugly in the half-light. I felt a shiver. I knew I couldn't run. I could try, of course, but I doubted I'd get far. I had to walk across this cave and meet the strange faces underneath the gazebo. And whatever happened next, I'd have to face. I can't, I thought. I just can't. Imagine, diary, the worst disappointment you've ever suffered in your life. You're a diary, so of course you don't have any feelings, but try to imagine that you do. Picture that disappointment, diary. Multiply it. Feel it swell like the crashing waves of an ominous sea. That is what I felt in this moment. The worst disappointment of my entire life. I was not brave. I expected to be brave. I expected to have the courage I needed as soon as an adventure arrived. When I was a little girl, and I was afraid to walk down the cellar stairs, I would tell myself that if goblins really waited behind the barrels below, I'd magically be holding a sword when I met them. If goblins were real, then anything could happen. If the impossible could happen in a bad way, then the impossible would happen in a good way. I might see goblins, but if I did, a sword would appear in my hands. There wasn't any sword. Not in real life. Here I was on the threshold of my adventure, and I didn't have the stomach. Nervous and jittery, and feeling like the child no one wants to play with at school, I walked towards the black gazebo. The 12 people seated inside stood up. They weren't dressed in large black cloaks, if that's what you're thinking. It seems like they should have been wearing capes, doesn't it? They wore ordinary clothes, or almost ordinary. Most of them wore a bit of green or purple, but they predominantly wore black. I looked around the sea of faces, and who should I see on the left but Newsboy Cap, my hazel-eyed friend from McGillicuddy and Murders. I stared at him with my mouth open. He cocked his head slowly. He seemed to remember me, at least a little. "Ms. Merkel?" said a small woman in the center. I turned and looked at her. Her voice was wavering and thin, and her face stretched back into a chubby smile. "Yes," I said. "Are you happy, Miss Merkel?" the small woman said. "No," I said. "Have you ever stood on the bottom of the sea, Miss Merkel?" the small woman said. "No," I said. "Have you ever died, Miss Merkel?" the small woman said. I stared at her. My heart thumped so fast I thought I would faint. "No," I said. "No, I have never died." "Good," the small woman said. "Tonight, you will have the chance to answer yes to all 3 of those questions." "Yes." "Yes, I am happy." "Yes, I have stood on the bottom of the sea." "Yes, I have died." We are the night enthusiasts, Miss Merkel, the small woman said. We thirst for blood. We search through tombs for life, and we embroider that life on the fabric of the world. We make more of our lives than we were originally given. My mouth was dry, so I merely nodded. Tonight, if you pass our test, you too can become a night enthusiast. I glanced over at the young man from McGillicuddy and Murders, the appallingly handsome one, and he looked down at the floor. I turned back to the small woman. Do I get a say? I said. My voice was small and scratchy. The small woman smiled. She looked up at me and she said, Magic unusuals are born, not made. Their powers can be unlocked by a gift from another magic unusual. Once the gift is given and the powers are unlocked, then you are doomed to be a magic unusual for the rest of your life. I didn't like the use of the word doomed. You have been brought to us, the small woman said. You have been given a chance to join the ranks of the night enthusiasts. It's an honor few receive, Miss Merkel. You will take our test. You will do as you are told. And if you pass, then you will become a member. And if I don't pass, I said, then you will die. Before I could respond to this spectacular declaration, the small woman folded her hands together like a schoolmistress preparing a lesson. Shall we begin? The members of the circle rose. I found myself looking at the young man. He shifted in his seat, then looked at me, meaningfully. He stood up. You may have my seat, Miss Merkel. While the night enthusiasts began preparing something in the center of the gazebo, I slipped into the young man's chair. He stood beside me, eyes facing forward. I waited, sure he was going to say something. My name is Noble James, he said. I'm sorry if you're frightened. Mr. James, I said, what's the test? What happens? Is it difficult? He glanced at me, then looked away. It's harder for some than for others. What does becoming a night enthusiast do to you? I said. Will I become different? He adjusted his newsboy cap, as if part of him wanted to hide underneath it. A part of you has to die in order to become a night enthusiast. That's where we get our powers from. Other magic unusuals get their powers differently, but the night enthusiasts are sure this is the best way. There are other groups of magic unusuals, I asked. He looked at me, concerned, and even sad. You didn't know. I'd known nothing, until Renfield showed up and tricked me into coming to this place. Who were those men who came to my apartment door? Had they really been my enemies? Now I was here, and I had no choice. I was going to become a night enthusiast. I was going to kill part of myself. Somehow. I turned away from Noble James, and I looked towards the center of the gazebo. The night enthusiasts had dragged in a large contraption. It looked like a copper tuba and a lemonade cart and the inside of a giant clock. It whirred and sputtered. A tank of bright green liquid glowed on the left side. The small woman turned to me. Your eyes have not yet changed color, Miss Merkel, she said. So you cannot teleport on your own. Instead, we will be feeding you some of this bright green liquid. It will take you to where we want you to go. When you arrive, you will have 10 minutes to kill the creature you face. If you fail to kill it, you will die. If you succeed in killing it, you will join the ranks of glory and become a night enthusiast. I swallowed. What was I going to do? Punch her in the face and run? Be brave, I told myself. But all those days of never killing my own spiders, and never saying no when other people wanted me to say yes, and never doing something when doing nothing was easier. It had prepared me for a life of indolence. I wasn't brave, because I'd never tried to be. The small woman lifted a glass to my mouth. The inside frothed and bubbled with glowing green liquid. "Drink," she said. The liquid touched my lips. We hope you've enjoyed episode 6, Stranger Than a Nightmare, of McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop is written and performed by Minerva Sweeney Wren. All rights reserved. Please subscribe, share it with your friends, and support Minerva Sweeney Wren at patreon.com/Sweeney Wren. McGillicuddy and Murder's Pawn Shop will continue next week with episode 7, Death at the Bottom of the Sea.